Senator Di Natale, have you got questions? AFP?
Yes, I've got some questions relating to the AFP's role in the training of counter-terrorism operations in Indonesia. On the 28th of August this year, ABC's 7:30 program aired some evidence that the counter-terrorism unit Detachment 88, which, as I think we discussed in estimates, or the last estimates hearing, it receives training and support from the AFP. The program aired evidence that Detachment 88 has been involved in torture and extrajudicial killings in West Papua. And we know that these allegations of torture and ill treatment have also been verified by groups like Human Rights Watch. During the program, there was a call from the Foreign Minister, Bob Carr, in relation to the recent shooting of Papuan independence leader Marco Tabuni for an inquiry. He called for an inquiry, and I note the AFP's response was that it doesn't investigate, receive briefings on, or ask what I think are fairly basic questions from the Indonesian authorities about human rights abuse allegations. So given that background, I just want to ask a few more questions about the training and support provided to Detachment 88. I understand that there are hundreds of thousands of security forces in Indonesia and that the AFP doesn't train all of them, but is it correct to say there's been around 12,000 trained in total since the Bali bombings through the Jakarta Centre for Law Enforcement Cooperation? Would that be about right?
Senator, those figures are right, but there's been 12,000 officers from, I think, around 55, 56 countries being trained at that facility that make up that 12,000, including Australian Federal Police.
Right.
I think Deputy Commissioner Drennan might have the numbers here for us about Detachment 88, but the media reporting you talked about back in August, I put out what we call a blue line response, which was the following day, to correct some of the public speculation in regards to the AFP's support of Detachment 88, and I'll let Deputy Commissioner Drennan sort of elaborate on this, but the first 2 points I just want to make was the AFP does not provide public order, tactical training or related equipment to Detachment 88, and the AFP does not and has not provided any support to the Indonesian National Police or Detachment 88 in any of their operational activities in West Papua. Again, on our website there's a very clear statement of what our responsibilities are and what we do. We have been working with Detachment 88 in one sense since 2005. There's been a range of things that they have done very positively in Indonesia, apart from the allegations of abuse that you mentioned. They have been responsible for the arrest of over 770 people for suspected terrorism offences. Around 600 of those have been convicted in the Indonesian courts. And I've got to say, from being in Bali last weekend for the Bali Memorial, the work of Detachment 88, and it's a very large organisation here, the work of parts of Detachment 88, I have no doubt, have saved Australian lives in the context of the work they've done in breaking up JI across the Indonesian archipelago. So in that regard, there's a range of very much positive activities that should be looked at, as well as the issues that you raise are the allegations of abuse, in particularly around the West Papua issue. So the AFP is focused very much on the positives, and we don't get involved in any of the areas that have been reported in the media. I've got to say, though, the media reporting's been quite loose with some of the factual data in regards to allegations against Detachment 88. I know there's been certainly a range of issues have been attributed to other forces in Indonesia, which Detachment 88 have been certainly copped the blame for. So I'll let Detective Drennan talk about this, Deputy Commissioner Drennan talk about this, because I specifically tasked him in the last month or so is to sit down with people who've worked in Indonesia, sit down and look at all of our programs with Detachment 88 to make sure that we were more than comfortable, given the basis of your questioning at the last estimates hearing, to reflect on that and to talk to the people on the ground, to be very, very clear about the role played by the AFP and the sort of support that is given to Detachment 88 in that context. So, Deputy Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Peter Drennan, Deputy Commissioner for National Security, Australian Federal Police. Senator, if I could just first go back to the beginning there, where you raised the allegations that Det 88's involvement in the death of Marco Tabuni.
So I'll correct you on that. The 7:30 program raised the allegations. Okay, I was just reporting that. Yep.
Okay, thank you. The International Crisis Group have actually reported on this incident, and they've actually reviewed the matter, and their findings on that was that Det 88 members were not involved in any way in the operation resulting in Tabuni's death. The INP have affirmed that that's the position. So again, as the Commissioner said, we just need to be a little bit cautious on what the media say in some circumstances, because you know, the International Crisis Group has reviewed that matter, and I think the International Crisis Group reputation speaks for themselves in their level of scrutiny and independence. Secondly, if we could just go to the number of officers who have been trained at the Jakarta Centre for Law Enforcement Cooperation. The Indonesian National Police, there's been 6,932 students. There have been 702 students which have from Detachment 88, 11 students...
Sorry, just what was that number?
702.
702.
11 of those members of Det 88 have been from the Papua province, and there is one member from the Det 88 who is stationed in Papua province who has attended a course at JSELEC, which has been supported by the AFP or funded by the AFP, and that was a counter-terrorism investigations program. The types of courses that other members from Det 88 from West Papua, the types of courses have undertaken at JSELEC, CT Investigations Management, Counter-Terrorism Financial Investigation Workshop, Counter-Terrorism Investigation Management, Informant Handling and Interviewing Techniques, Investigation Management, CT and Analysing the Internet, Interviewing in Prison Debriefing course, and CT Investigations Management course. Now, those courses are held at JSELEC but provided by a range of donor countries, predominantly from Europe and the UK. You'll see from those there are no courses there which are tactically orientated. That is, none which deal with public order or any tactical operations that police may be involved in. In regards to the other types of courses that Detachment 88 officers may have attended at JSELEC, they are of a similar nature, and I'll just run through those if it may help you. Crime investigations, management of transnational crime, criminal intelligence, financial investigations, proceeds of crime, communications, management, security risk management, response to CBRN, so chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear events, internet offences, child protection, and post-bomb blast management. And again, you'll see from that list of courses that there are none there which are tactical in their nature whatsoever. The other thing that I would mention there is that the officers that attend from Detachment 88, it is a decision by the Indonesian National Police. JSELEC provide the courses. The request goes to the Indonesian National Police to provide officers, and they select officers from across the entire INP to attend those different programs.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that comprehensive background there. It's nice to have someone who's answered a lot of the questions before I've had the opportunity to ask them, so I appreciate that.
We're here to assist you, Senator.
Just a few questions about background checks. What is actually done in the way of background checks? Particularly, I mean, I take your point that there may be some controversy around the incident with Marco Tabuni, but I think that it is reasonably well established that there have been members of Detachment 88 who have been involved in other non-lawful activities. What work's done in the way of background checks prior to the training? I understand that they're selected by the Indonesian forces, but is there any work done to do in the way of background checks to establish that the people we're training have got a track record that we're pleased to support?
Senator, it's probably best to answer it this way. Firstly, the nature of the courses, as I articulated, are very much focused on investigations management, forensics and child protection type things. The nature of the allegations which have been raised in the media, and as I said, I treat them with some caution.
Well, it's not just the media. Human Rights Watch have also indicated concerns.
Again, I treat those with some caution, but they are operations of a tactical nature. So when police officers have been involved in a tactical sense of resolution of matters of arrests, so the actual type of people who have been selected to go on the courses which are conducted at JSLIC or which we're supporting are of a different nature to the type of activities that the police would be involved in. As far as is there checks done in regards to the history of each individual officer, the INP select those officers. We don't have any involvement in that, but the INP are also very aware of our position in regards to we provide these courses for investigations and for the nature of the things I described earlier, and we rely upon them on selecting suitable officers to attend those training programs. Within the training programs themselves, though, there is a human rights element which is built in, and then whether that's through the scenario base of the training or whether it's a specific element of the training, it is incorporated in each of those training programs.
Can I just add to that, Senator, that that human rights training is to Australian standards. I mean, we have the Commandant of JCLEC. It's a joint facility between the INP and the AFP. And we insist on the training in those things being done to international standards, including what we here in Australia commit to as far as international human rights and the protection of human rights. So this is an opportunity to have people from multiple countries, as I said, over 50 countries have trained there, to come together and talk about some of the implications of potential human rights abuses, take these as case studies and discuss these in the classroom before they leave and go back to their various areas.
Let me ask you, if you became aware of, say, a specific allegation of human rights abuse, what would the process then be for gathering more information about those specific allegations?
Senator, if you're saying what the process that we would have?
Well, what's the process in general? Obviously, within the within JSLEC, or whether the AFP in particular would follow those issues up.
We would certainly report those matters to the Indonesian National Police, who would have the responsibility of dealing with them. And if I could just add there, the Indonesian National Police is actually overseen by the Indonesian National Human Rights Commission and also a National Police Commission, and also numerous government organisation human rights groups, as you outlined before, closely monitor their activities. In 2009, the Chief of the Indonesian National Police introduced a regulation specifically addressing the implementation of human rights principles and standards in the discharge of the duties of the Indonesian National Police. And in a more general sense, the INP is responsible for prosecuting matters according to the rule of law, which therefore brings those matters under the scrutiny of the courts. We would rely upon those tiers of governance and oversight to ensure that the INP discharge their obligations in relation to the range of international human rights conventions to which they are signatories. And again, there are 9 core international human rights treaties under the United Nations. Indonesia has signed 8 of those, signed all 9 of those and ratified 8 with 1 more to come.
So how often are specific allegations brought before the AFP?
I'm not aware that there has been any brought specifically to the AFP.
So in your view, does that indicate that the human rights issue in terms of some of the people who are being trained is a non-issue?
No, what I'm saying is that none have been brought before us. The type of training that we provide and the officers who are participating in those training are not ones we would expect to be involved in activities of the nature where allegations of human rights abuse have been raised.
Okay.
Senator, can I just say it? One of the points I made in the opening comments before I passed to Deputy Commissioner Drennan was that the Detachment 88 have a very wide role in Indonesia, and they are really the investigative capability for the Indonesian National Police to investigate and prosecute terrorist offences.
Sure.
So if you think about that in the context of across the whole of the archipelago, and again, they've arrested 775 people with terrorism offences since the Bali bombings took place in 2002. with over 600 of those being prosecuted and convicted in the courts in Indonesia. So we're talking about a very large group of people here in which we have a very small slice. 78 of them, I think, from Detachment 88 have come and done those training programs with us. So we are we are open to a very small component of what is a very large group within an even larger organisation of the Indonesian National Police.
Sure, no, I appreciate that, but small or large, I mean, it's important to establish
I think
whether...
publicly there's a perception that Detachment 88 are a group of people, a small group of people who move around in one group, and that's not the case, as we've just tried to explain.
No, I'm aware
here.
of that, I suppose, and obviously the concern. We share, I think, a view that they have done some good work in preventing terrorism in Indonesia. The concern I have is that, of course, that some of the activities within segments of Detachment 88 has moved from a counter-terrorism operation to a counter-separatism operation within Papua, and that may apply only to a small number of that unit, but it's still significant, particularly for the people of West Papua. So hence the basis for my questions.
I think we are very careful, and hopefully you're seeing that, we're very careful to limit our support to those actions that are instrumental in ridding Indonesia and the region of terrorist activity and protecting Australian lives in the process.
I mean, do you share a concern that some of the allegations that may be made end up being investigated by the same agencies, essentially, that are responsible for committing the abuses? Is that something that is of concern to you?
We don't have visibility on that, but I mean, people make the same allegations against police forces who have internal investigations units, so it's impossible for me to say in a foreign country what level of scrutiny should be applied to those things.
Senator, I did articulate again just a short time ago, there are a range of oversight bodies which sit across the top of the Indonesian National Police, which do...
But they don't do the investigating, do they?
Well, they certainly provide a scrutiny in relation to it. I mean, it's similar here. I mean, the Ombudsman or any range of committees here in Australia, have a monitoring role of what the AFP does, and certainly if they are not happy with what we're doing, then we're held to account for it. If I could just sort of go back to the other issue you raised there in regards to, I guess, counter-terrorism work morphing into counter-separatist work. The INP are very clear on the fact that we support them in their counter-terrorism activities. They do draw a very distinct difference between counter-terrorism and counter-separatism, and they are fully aware that we do not and would not be involved in any counter-separatism work. On that note, we have not provided or not been involved in any activities in West Papua at all.
Oh, well, no, you've not been directly involved, but you've trained members of Detachment 88, and we don't know what numbers are involved in West Papua and what activities they've been involved in West Papua. Well,
again, to be clear, when we have trained one person from Det 88 who was in West Papua on a CT investigations course. So
of the other members, again, to be clear, what was the total number? Was 702 members of Detachment 88, was that correct?
That's correct.
And I thought you'd said 11.
11 have undertaken training programs through JSELEC from Det 88 in West Papua.
Yes.
In one of those, members had attended a course which was funded by the AFP. The other 10 had attended courses which have been funded by other donor countries. But again, those courses were of a similar nature.
Okay, okay. Just in terms of the sort of threshold test for limiting an individual's involvement in training, at what point do we say that there's evidence against them and that we should withhold any training activities for an individual? Should that be brought to your attention?
Senator, we really rely on the Indonesian National Police to select the appropriate people to come on those programs. Right. You have to understand that we're talking about relatively small numbers of people who come and do the training. These are highly competitive programs. These are programs in which only the best people would be selected to come on who have a significant future, leadership future within that organisation. So the level of scrutiny that's placed by the INP would be significant in that regard. And in an organisation of over 400,000 police in the Indonesian National Police, 400,000, we're talking about less than 100 have been trained in that regard from Detachment 88, I think, from that area. So we really do rely on the Indonesian National Police. They know very well our stance on this. We've been very clear about that in what support we can provide and cannot provide. I brought with us today a chart which we could table for you, which lists the expenditure we have in each of those areas. It's around $300 and something thousand in direct support to them over the last few years. It's not a lot of money in the context of broader aid, but we're more than happy to table that for the committee so you can see exactly where the money has been going and how that's actually worked.
I suppose you've really come to the point that I'm trying to make is that given that it carries with it, it's such a competitive program, it has to carry with it some degree of legitimacy, if you like, that being trained gives some measure of credibility and international legitimacy to those people who've been trained. And what I'm trying to establish is that we are ensuring that we can, that legitimacy is deserved and it's earned. You're telling me that the screening process is essentially done by the Indonesian National Police and that the AFP have no real role in the vetting of individual people who are going through the training program. That's a fair analysis?
That's right, Senator. But to be realistic about this, we are talking about training delivered in Indonesia. Yes, we have supported it financially and we support some of those programs financially, but we do have to rely and trust our partners to pick the right people to come onto these programs. They know our stance on this. They read the newspapers like everyone else does. They realise in Australia this is a very topical issue, and they certainly are aware of the 7:30 report and some of the other media that's been raised about this, because we've spoken to them about it personally. So they are very clear on our expectations and very clear on our obligations and our requirement for them to be selecting the right people to come on these programs. The reason I had the Deputy Commissioner sit down with people who've been in Indonesia for a couple of years, worked with Detachment 88, worked on these programs, is to satisfy myself, given the media reporting, that we are doing everything that is reasonable and appropriate to ensure that we are only supporting the activities that would be acceptable to the Australian community. And I've done that, and I'm satisfied, given what's been told to me and given what we've told to you today, that we are taking significant precautions to make sure that the Australian community is not tantamount to funding anything which would be unacceptable in this country. As I go back to 775 arrests for counter-terrorism matters, 600 people prosecuted and convicted in Indonesian courts for terrorism-related offences, which, as I said, have saved Australian lives. There's over 900,000 people go to Bali each year, and I've said, having been in there last week and seen the memorial and seen the victims, the surviving victims of the Bali disaster, the Bali bombings. I think that some of the work that has been done in Indonesia by the Indonesian National Police needs to be recognised. And yes, we need to be very careful about where the funding's going, but I think that we also need to recognise the terrific work that's been done across the board in protecting Indonesians and Australians from future attack.
I recognise that, and as I said previously, I understand the important work that's been done in counter-terrorism, but I've also seen the number of people who've died in West Papua, the people who during the recent National Congress were arrested, a number of whom were killed, a number of whom were imprisoned. The very clear reports that the Indonesian forces and members of Detachment 88 were involved in that, and it's for that reason that I'm asking you those questions. So I appreciate what you're saying about the role that they've played in terms of terrorism, and as I said previously, I share the view that they've done some very important work, but I don't think you can use that and ignore what is actually happening in West Papua at the moment, and the fact that there are Indonesian police forces and very credible reports, not just in the media, but by a number of human rights monitors, where very credible allegations, interviews with victims, witnesses of incidents and so on, eyewitnesses, who have implicated members of the Indonesian police force in some of those unlawful activities. So I think it's worthy of ensuring that the work that we're doing through our training activities isn't contributing to that. And it's for that reason that I ask those questions.
Now, Senator, I understand that, and all I'm saying is I hope we've been able to give the committee some confidence that the appropriate level of scrutiny is being applied by the senior executive of the AFP, including personally by myself, to ensure that that's not the case.
Okay, thank you. Just one final question. If an allegation, a specific allegation against an individual was made, would the AFP have any role in following that up, or are you saying that you would leave it entirely up to the Indonesian National Police?
Look, the issue of jurisdiction becomes central to all of this, and we would not have any jurisdiction to investigate that matter. We would report it to the appropriate authorities in Indonesia. We may well report it to the Department of Foreign Affairs if it related to activities of of a certain type, but the jurisdiction is within Indonesia to settle its own affairs, and we would just ensure that that information was passed through.
But we're funding the training activities that are going on. So I suppose my question is relating specifically to individuals who may have benefited from that training.
Well, look,
would
I mean,
that cause some concern to reconsider?
Look, hypothetical question, but I mean, I can tell you that if there was any taint of anyone we had trained being involved in inappropriate activity, we would certainly have to review that level of support that we would provide.
Okay.
And that's clearly evident to the Indonesians as we speak.
Well, thank you for that assurance, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Now, Senator